In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Amazon under scrutiny by regulators in its biggest market outside the U.S. Now, German authorities have new concerns about the company's size and scale. Plus, a Chinese scientist has shocked the world with claims he produced the world's first gene-edited babies. We'll talk to one researcher who's used the same tools to kill cancer about the international and ethical firestorm. And how posting on Instagram can bring in the big bucks. We'll take a special look at so-called social influencers making a career from marketing their own brand with paying clients. But first, to our top story, big tech stocks in limbo amidst trade and tariff threats ahead of President Trump's much-anticipated meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And Apple and Amazon could take the biggest beating. This, as the Wall Street Journal is reporting, some of the top tech CEOs from Google to Microsoft are set to meet with the Trump administration next week. Here's what the president had to say about the prospects of a deal with China moments before he took off for the G20 summit in Buenos Aires.
I think we're very close to doing something with China, but I don't know that I want to do it, because what we have right now is billions and billions of dollars coming into the United States in the form of tariffs or taxes. So I really don't know, but I will tell you that I think China wants to make a deal. I'm open to making a deal, but frankly, I like the deal we have right now.
The president has said he's considering slapping tariffs on the iPhone. This after Apple lost its crown as the world's most valuable company to an old nemesis, Microsoft. The market caps of Microsoft and Apple have since been neck and neck. Apple shares have slumped 25% since its early October peak. Here to talk about the month in tech and the months ahead, ARK Investment CEO Cathie Wood. So, Cathie, Microsoft and Apple going back and forth all week. Do you think it's a sign of what's to come, a not great sign of what's to come for Apple?
Well, I actually think that Apple, because analysts are focused mostly on units and ASPs or average selling prices, very simplistically, I think it's really reached a period of undervaluation now, having come down this much since earnings. I think they've pushed the pricing envelope a little bit too much, but I think their services business is becoming very interesting. Not only the App Store, but all of the ways they're getting involved with healthcare and augmented reality. I think this is going to become more of a services model, which is a more higher multiple, or it'll achieve a higher valuation at the end of the day.
Still, there's this uncertainty about trade. How concerned are you about potential tariffs on the iPhone?
Well, before I heard today that Peter Navarro was back on the invite list to go to Argentina with President Trump, I was much more optimistic. He's a saber rattler, and I thought that they were going to leave him out and let Lighthizer and Larry Kudlow do the work behind the scenes. I do think a lot of work is going on behind the scenes, and I think we're seeing movement from China on their own economy is slowing down, so they are cutting taxes internally, they're cutting import duties, and I have a feeling when we turn around at the end of the day, we're going to see, at the conclusion of negotiations, perhaps not this weekend, lower tariffs throughout the world. And I actually think this is going to be a very positive result long term.
Peter Navarro, one of Trump's top trade advisors, what about Microsoft? Do you see Microsoft going on a longer bull run from here with the rise of the cloud?
Yeah, I think Microsoft has done a lot of things right. In the cloud, of course, gaming, of course, and I think it's earned its way back into the good graces of investors, even though its base business, Windows and so forth, that we see is having more and more technical problems. So I don't think, longer term, I do think Apple will continue to lead the charge. It's going through a period right now of uncertainty just because of very short-term thinking about pricing and units. But, you've got upwards of 1 billion users of iPhones and other Apple products around the world, and that's only growing year by year. So we're pretty excited about the long-term prospects for Apple.
What about Amazon, Kathy, because, this is a company that's faced verbal and Twitter assaults from the president, now under fire from German regulators, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. Do you think tariffs could have a big impact on Amazon, given the company's reliance on these third-party sellers?
I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, Amazon is all about customer first, delighting the customer. And I think that's awfully hard for politicians to fight when their electorates love a product. And I feel the same way about Apple. So if we get temporary tariffs, I do think they will be just that, temporary. These are products that delight the consumer, and these are the people that politicians want to make happy.
Now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Trump administration has set up this roundtable with tech executives, including the CEOs of Microsoft and Google, Sundar Pichai, who is scheduled to testify on Capitol Hill next week. Do you think anything promising can come out of a meeting like this that, would impact an investment strategy?
Well, I do think it's good that they're talking, much better than arguing in the media. So, and I think that at the end of the day, President Trump wants our innovative leaders to continue to dominate out there. We do see that China has on its set of priorities being number one in artificial intelligence and all kinds of technology. And I think President Trump is responding to that. So I think we'll be in a how do we work together mode as opposed to an adversarial mode. So I think it's good news.
Meantime, Kathy, Facebook's in the middle of a PR nightmare, and shares are way down since that July peak. Concerns that go all the way to the very top, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, and how they handled Russian election meddling, fake news. Do you think that this is going to continue to punish the stock, given that we haven't yet seen concrete evidence that this is impacting engagement among users?
Well, we got the first signs in their last quarterly report that it has impacted engagement slightly, not as much as many might have thought. What we are also seeing, though, is in terms of top brands, Facebook is losing its status there. And when that happens, usually we do have periods of underperformance by the business and by the stocks. Thank goodness they have Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and other properties to monetize, because we do think they are going to be continuing to lower the ad loads on Facebook proper and trying to right that ship. They have a little bit of work to do.
How optimistic are you that Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, though, can pick up the slack?
Yeah, it's going to be hard. Facebook is incredibly important to them. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more disappointments. They're coming off very rapid growth. And we also know that television advertising is starting to find its way online. There aren't many places to go. So Facebook's one of the biggest. Google, of course, Twitter, Amazon, in fact, is getting a lot of advertising now, now that it is effectively becoming a search engine when it comes to commerce. So I don't think all is lost. I don't think the advertising is going to disappear from Facebook. There just are not a lot of outlets for online advertising at scale.
Now, I also got to ask you about Tesla. It has been a rocky year for Elon Musk, but on the other hand, a pretty successful year when you look at Model 3 production. What is the year coming for Tesla hold, given that there's also some political uncertainty in terms of how the administration plans to handle electric car, tax credits, and tariffs on auto imports?
Yes, well, according to our research at ARC, we spend all of our time doing research on disruptive innovation. We think that electric vehicles are not going to need subsidies in a few years, and in many ways they don't need them now. We're capacity constrained on batteries, so it's very interesting that Tesla's Model 3 was the #1 selling car, no matter whether electric or gas-powered, in the United States in the third quarter if you measure by revenue. We think Tesla's on its way. It took a long time to get the manufacturing process right, and they still are working out bugs, but we think they're on their way. It's a little bit like with SpaceX. It took them a long time to figure out how to land those rockets on barges in the middle of the ocean. Once they did it, they've been doing it very successfully ever since, almost flawlessly. We think that we're dealing with the same sorts of situation right now.
All right, so good to have you back, Kathy Wood, ARK Investment CEO. Much to talk about in the year to come, Kathy. Thanks again. Coming up, earlier this week, we saw the UK crackdown on Facebook. Now Germany is cracking down on Amazon. Why European countries are hitting U.S. tech giants where it hurts. Next, this is Bloomberg. Europe's antitrust scrutiny of big tech companies is now trained on Amazon. Germany is looking into the company's double role as the country's largest retailer and the biggest online host for smaller stores. The probe piles on to EU concerns about whether Amazon gathers information on rival sellers to help launch its own products. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg Tech Senior Executive Editor Brad Stone. Brad, what exactly are German regulators looking at here?
Right. So, Emily, as you mentioned, Amazon has a dual role in most markets where it operates. It administers an e-commerce platform where other smaller sellers can sell. It also is the biggest seller on that platform. And this German cartel office says it's gotten a lot of complaints over the past few years about how Amazon performs that dual role, how it, manages the data from smaller sellers on the site, how much transparency there is around the process when Amazon shuts down a seller, how reviews work. And so it's going to be collecting, information from those sellers and looking at how Amazon administers the dual role.
So, in the same way we saw the EU take a look at Google, would this potentially be a multi-year investigation where, we wouldn't know potential consequences for many years?
Yeah, you got that right. These things take a long time. The same office is investigating Facebook. It has been for 2.5 years. The key phrase here is dominant position. They're going to be looking into whether Amazon has one in Germany and whether it abuses that position. Amazon is a minority percentage of online sales in Germany, and online sales are probably 12 to 15% of overall retail. So if you look at market share numbers, it's a relatively small player, but if they look at the impact on smaller businesses, if they look at how many consumers in Germany use Amazon, then maybe it does have a dominant position. And then, of course, they'll have to look at whether it abuses it, and if so, what are the remedies?
Could U.S. regulators make the same case that Amazon has the same problem here in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly a line of inquiry. The European Union Competition Commission is looking at pretty much the exact same thing, how Amazon uses data from its market platform to inform its overall business. But look, I mean, Europe with a business foundation of small to medium-sized companies with a sense that they have been outpaced by American tech giants, they're leading this. We haven't heard much from the FTC or the Department of Justice along these lines, but certainly it's ripe for further inquiry.
All right, Bloomberg Tech's Brad Stone will continue to follow that scrutiny coming out of Germany. Sticking with Amazon now, AWS revenue is expected to reach $71 billion by 2022, giving the company's cloud business a valuation of about $350 billion. That's according to the latest research by Jefferies analyst Brent Thill, who's just come back from Amazon's AWS conference in Las Vegas. He's here with me in the studio. So that's a big number. How do you get there?
They're going to be $26 billion this year. They're 2.5 times larger than Microsoft right now with Azure, and they're 6.5 times larger than Google. So right now they're kind of the runaway freight train in the cloud. And one of the key things for Vegas this week was a 2.5 to 3.5 increase in commitment sizes by the partners. So the deal sizes are going larger, and you have these big, very complex organizations like financial services, government, who are kind of not wanting to go to the cloud, who are now all in. Capital One had a booth right on the showroom floor saying, we're not trying to sell credit cards, we're here to tell you about how we're going to the cloud. And you never would hear a credit card company going all in on the cloud, 2 years ago. Fortnite, the game that many of our kids play that we're really unhappy with as parents. 8 million concurrent users. So every company, every walk of life is saying that this is a great way to put their enterprise compute onto this platform. So we expect that growth rate to continue, 26 billion to 70 billion by that time frame you mentioned. And again, when you look at software multiples, 5 to us is pretty reasonable. And that gets you to that number you mentioned, 350. That is roughly half their market cap now. So it's going to keep further compounding. It's high margin, and it's going to let Amazon do things that other retailers can't do.
How much does Amazon have to be worried about Microsoft? We saw Microsoft overtake Apple as world's most valuable company this week. Apple and Microsoft have been neck and neck, and a lot of that is due to optimism around Microsoft's cloud platform. Azure's
doing really well. So the unique thing that Microsoft has is the hybrid cloud. You have on-prem and you have cloud. And so we think that ultimately what's happening with Microsoft is they resonate very well in these old school industries, big banks, big insurance, government. So the one thing that Amazon did at this conference that I thought was the biggest news from a product perspective is what's called Amazon Outposts, which is let you take the Amazon cloud on-prem. Everyone was speculating that this would happen. It's really the only advantage they had against Microsoft had against them, and Microsoft has the application suite, but now Amazon's effectively taken one of the two biggest concerns away. And so we think that Microsoft's going to be right now the challenger. AWS is the far runaway leader, and then Google is the up-and-comer. And now with Thomas Kurian on board from Oracle, we think he knows a lot about where all the Oracle workloads are buried, and he wants to convert them to the Google Cloud.
Right, Thomas Kurian replacing Diane Greene as the head of Google Cloud. Now, Amazon's facing much bigger picture concerns here. Regulatory issues in Europe that we just discussed, potential tariffs impacting third-party sales on the website. How concerned are you about some of these bigger issues affecting Amazon at large?
Everyone's got the same risks, right? We cover Facebook, Google, they're all under duress. The number one question from our institutional investors is what's going to happen with regulatory overhang? And ultimately, no one really knows exactly what's going to happen, but we do think that a form of GDPR in Europe will effectively potentially come to the US. It may not be as stiff because the regulators will, it's going to help these companies if there's more regulation, right? The big platforms win, the little guys get hurt. So I think they have to be a little careful because they could stun innovation. So our belief is that, ultimately they're all going to have the same playing field, but if there are increasing regulations, it honestly will hurt them.
Brent Thill, Jefferies, interesting perspective that regulation could help the big guys. Thanks so much for stopping by. Good to have you here. Coming up, the LA Auto Show is usually the home of glitzy reveals and brand new cars packed with technology. But we'll speak to one startup who's deliberately keeping their EV away from the show this year. This is Bloomberg. The LA Auto Show is a place where traditional automakers and startups put their next-gen vehicles on display. But one car maker has decided not to showcase anything at all. Lucid is almost 2 years behind schedule with its Air EV, but $1 billion investment from the Saudi Public Investment Fund in September has put them back on track. Lucid's Vice President for Design, Derek Jenkins, spoke exclusively to Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow at the Auto Show about why the company is keeping quiet for now.
At Lucid, it's really a clean sheet. We have to decide who is our customer, who are we going after, what is our core technology, our core capability, our market position, and then, of course, what is the brand personality and character of the company. All those things need to be decided, so you get to make your own rules in a way, which is a really rewarding and enjoyable thing.
Well, let's dig into that a bit. So what is going to be the price point, the base price point of this vehicle? Who are you targeting? What is the Lucid Air going to be?
Yeah, so we're coming to market in a luxury price point. Those vehicles will be most likely in the $90,000 price range and up. and they'll be highly equipped. However, over time, we will introduce an entry-level vehicle at an entry-level price. It'll be down in the $60,000 price range.
So you are principally concerned as Vice President for Design with the interior, the exterior, but you've got a very deep knowledge of the car. When it comes to the technology inside the Lucid Air, what sets it apart from the Tesla? What sets it apart from those other vehicles, EVs, that were announced at the LA Auto Show this week?
Yeah, what I think really sets it apart is our approach to EV technology and integration. So, you know, if you think about in the past what it's taken to create high horsepower, high torque, you know, large motor, large transmission, and all the ancillary components to make that work, EV is the miniaturization, the digitization of the drivetrain. And so with that miniaturization, we're able to package the vehicle different. A lot more space on the inside, more compact on the outside. So all the dimensional and packaging rules that we know from internal combustion, that's being rewritten, and the Lucid Air is the first of that type of vehicle doing that. And I don't see that elsewhere in the marketplace.
The timeline for the Lucid Air has changed a little bit. What is the timeline now? When are we going to start seeing, when will we see a Lucid Air on the roads? So
we'll have our first prototypes running around, a fleet of prototypes running around in early January 2020. But the actual on-sale date will be later in the year, so end of 2020 is when we want to deliver our first customer vehicles.
One of the big things that's jumped out at me from the LA Auto Show this week is this kind of broader industry shift from sedans to SUVs.
Right.
You see a lot of people looking at that. You've been working on this sedan, and that's the segment of the market you're targeting, but are you currently designing an SUV? Is that in your thinking longer term?
Yeah, so we've had even when we started this whole program, there was a lot of discussion of sedan or SUV first, and we felt the sedan format was the best place to disrupt, and it was the best place to show a true EV capability, better handling dynamics, better for performance, better for comfort, better for range through aerodynamics. So we wanted to start there, but of course we're going to follow that up with a SUV / crossover type product near after we launch the Lucid Air.
Lucid's design chief Derek Jenkins speaking with our own Ed Ludlow at the LA Auto Show. Well, General Motors President Dan Ammann will leave his current role to become CEO of its self-driving business, Cruise. It's another sign GM sees a future where self-driving cars and robo-taxis overtake its core car-making business. Ammann will continue to report to GM CEO Mary Barra. Coming up, new claims from China suggest a future with gene-edited babies has arrived, kicking off a worldwide controversy. What are the risks? We will discuss next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This week, a Chinese researcher sent the scientific community into shock, claiming he had created the world's first 2 genetically edited babies. Using CRISPR, a cheap but powerful gene editing tool, he claims to have tweaked the DNA of 2 human embryos, now twin girls, to be HIV resistant. Though the claims have yet to be verified, the reports have prompted widespread condemnation from scientists across the globe, with many calling it an unethical use of technology. The last several years in science have unleashed a CRISPR frenzy, with some seeing the potential to cure and possibly eliminate deadly disease, and others warning of the risks. So far, the technology has been tested to boost crop production, end malaria in mosquitoes, and create Lyme disease-proof mice. And in 2014, high schooler Jiwoo Lee used it to disrupt lung cancer cell multiplication. Lee, now a student at Stanford University, joins us from Stanford to discuss. We're also joined by Bloomberg's U.S. healthcare editor, Drew Armstrong, in New York. So, Drew, what exactly does this scientist claim to have done?
I mean, you described it pretty well. He says that he has modified the two of the embryos that were then delivered into 2 young baby girls who according to him, have a certain resistance to HIV. It's essentially modifying the genes of a human being and doing it from birth and making sure that it permeates all of the DNA in their body. It's an exceptionally bold claim. It's the type of thing that people have thought might be possible at some point, but a lot of the field has said, you know, we weren't ready to quite make this leap just yet. It's set off an unbelievable controversy in the scientific community.
Now, Jiwoo, you've developed a technique using CRISPR to kill cancer cells, basically, and you've also continued this research at Stanford. You've been involved in the ethical debate around it as well. What's your reaction to this scientist's claim?
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when I first read the article, and I definitely think that it's a little bit premature, especially considering the fact that like previous guidelines have said not to do any gene editing in embryos. I think it's a step forward. I don't know if it's a step forward that we should have taken this early on, but it's going to be interesting to see where scientists and ethicists decide to go on next.
Now, there's an unofficial international moratorium on using this technology on humans. Even the co-inventor of CRISPR said on Bloomberg earlier that she's disgusted by this. Jiwoo, what do we know about the actual risks? This scientist says these babies have been born healthy. Are there risks that we don't know?
Yeah, we don't yet know the exact changes that CRISPR is going to make on the other parts of the genome, because if you make one change in the genome, you don't know how it's going to affect any other phenotypes. For example, the particular gene that the scientists decided to change to make the babies resistant to HIV, we don't know how that gene is going to influence any other diseases. Some people think that that gene also can influence your risk for West Nile virus and make you actually more susceptible to other diseases. Whether it's going to affect like any other like disease susceptibility, we still don't know yet.
Jiwoo, the Chinese National Health Commission is investigating, and Drew, tell us a little bit more about the Chinese government's reaction here, because officials are not happy.
No, they're not, and I think we're still seeing that reaction play out. Right now, we've seen some of the Chinese health officials say that they've put a stop to his research. He pulled out of a conference where he was supposed to speak in Hong Kong, and there have been officials out there saying that what he did appears to have been illegal, potentially. And there also appears to be some issues where his university, where he was working at in Shenzhen, said that there may have been some signatures forged on permission documents for the university's ethical committee. So I think we are going to see this continue to play out in terms of a consequences standpoint. China has a booming biotechnology industry. It is very interested in being at the forefront of some of these technologies, like gene editing, like new therapies in cancer, and a lot of very exciting stuff. I think it also wants to show that it is an entirely legitimate industry in the world. You know, parts of China biomedical research in the past have been seen a little bit as a wild, wild west, and this is an opportunity for the government there to decide and make very clear to the world how it stands about certain research ethics, what's permissible and what's not. And I have a feeling that this researcher is going to mark a very pivotal point in the history of how the Chinese regulators and government approach the industry.
There are 3 different public companies working on CRISPR right now. There are folks like you, Jiwoo, who are continuing to do research on the future of this technology. What could be possible with CRISPR in the future with regard to human life, and what are the technological hurdles needed to be overcome to get there?
I definitely think that the future of CRISPR lies with human therapeutics. There are already a lot of clinical trials going on to use CRISPR for like cancer therapies or other like blood disorders. One of the main drawbacks or hurdles that we have to overcome before we can actually use CRISPR in humans is the delivery. Delivery of CRISPR into humans is still something we need to research further in order to like actually use it as a therapeutic.
All right. Well, Jiwoo Lee, we're going to continue to follow your work at Stanford. Drew Armstrong, our U.S. healthcare editor. Lots to continue watching here. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, to a case of style becoming substance. The whistleblower behind the Cambridge Analytica revelation says the now defunct data research firm used the fashion preferences of Facebook users to target political messaging. Essentially, the company was working out how you would vote based on what you're wearing. Bloomberg Tech's Nate Langston wrote the story and joined me earlier.
A lot of this stems from Christopher Wiley, who, for anyone who doesn't remember, is the original whistleblower behind the Cambridge Analytica scandal back in March. This was when we saw Facebook shown to be, the data rather on Facebook shown to be used in election interference. And Chris was one of the research directors at this firm back in 2014 who blew the whistle on how this company had acquired data and how it had been used subsequently. And obviously it's something Facebook has really tried to distance itself from in the fake news debate that's followed over the last few months. But he was speaking today here in England about fashion and fashion brands, and he was saying that one of the key pieces of data and information that Cambridge Analytica used to determine how they should be targeting different people with different political messages was their interest in certain fashion brands, and not necessarily just clothing, but also magazines and high street retail stores. And they were actually able to work out, based on how somebody interacted with individual brands and the number of other brands that they interacted with, just how they were politically leaning or could be persuaded to lean politically purely based on those brands.
I'm curious how they drew their conclusions. You're liberal if you like to wear what? You're conservative if you like to wear what?
Well, I mean, a few examples that stood out to me is that if you were someone who is engaged with Abercrombie and Fitch, for example, you might be a bit more liberal and outgoing. If you were someone that liked to wear jeans made by Wrangler, then maybe you were more on the conservative side. And one of the key words that was used is that they like things to sort of stay stable. I'm a big fan of stability. So it's interesting just how important those sorts of associations were between the brands that someone likes and the way they are politically leaning.
Facebook is under criticism from all fronts right now. How much do Facebook executives and Facebook investors need to worry about Cambridge Analytica going forward?
Well, I mean, Facebook has spent the last few months either being, with CEO Mark Zuckerberg being demanded to speak in front of Parliament here in Britain, and so far refusing, even to the extent that earlier this week, when one of its privacy chiefs was here giving evidence to a parliamentary committee, they made a point of putting an empty chair with Mark Zuckerberg's name in front of it, just to show that he was supposed to be there, that they wanted him there, and that he'd refused for multiple times now to show up. That's not going to go away probably until he actually agrees to speak in front of them. And certainly I think that we've seen that of the appearances that Zuckerberg's had in front of Congress and had in front of the European Parliament, that it's the British team investigating social media's role in fake news that's going to give him the hardest time. And that's definitely something that people think is a reason why he's not showing up for some of these hearings.
Do you think we'll hear anything more from Cambridge Analytica or Christopher Wiley? It seems like the scandal that just won't give up.
I think it's less likely we'll hear anything specific from Cambridge Analytica itself. I mean, partly because it's now a defunct entity, but Chris. I mean, I speak to Chris relatively regularly, and it always feels like there's something else around the corner, and I think this fashion topic is one that maybe has been coming for a little while because of his very large personal interest in fashion. He was studying a fashion PhD, I think, before he worked at that company. So, maybe this is the sort of the last big thing, but it always just seems like whenever you think it's done, there's something else that keeps coming. So it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Bloomberg Tech's Nate Langston there from London. Coming up, companies are expected to spend close to $1.6 billion this year on influencers. But what does it take to turn the social media platform into a full-time career? Our special report is next. This is Bloomberg. Megan Young goes on outdoor adventures for a living. Her job? To post on Instagram when she gets home. Megan is a new kind of celebrity, a social media influencer, and to many, her career doesn't seem like a career at all. But as businesses increasingly recognize the value of social media marketing, it's becoming a business that's bringing in billions of dollars each year. Bloomberg's Aki Ito headed to Washington to investigate.
The orange sky at dawn, snow-dusted peaks. This is the kind of beauty many of us only see on Instagram. And this Instagrammer delivers these views to you for a living. She's a new kind of celebrity. And she makes money by promoting things to her fans. It's a lucrative world with billions of dollars rushing in.
My name is Megan Young, and I'm an influencer. All right, we're heading out for our river cruise.
At first glance, Megan's job doesn't seem like a job at all.
Check this out. Woo-wee. For a living, I go on outdoor adventures, take photos of it, and then share it across social media platforms when I get home.
But unlike you and me, Megan gets paid to share some of these photos. She has almost 200,000 followers on Instagram, and all kinds of companies pay her to endorse their products on her feed.
It can be things like technical gear, from raincoats to pants to boots. It can be different snacks that keep me going on the trail, and also travel destinations, which are honestly my favorite things to do because it's really fun to explore new landscapes.
Megan's on track to earn between $50,000 and $100,000 over the next year. About 10% of her feed is sponsored.
For a stories post on Instagram, that usually starts around $200 per day. And then for posts to the social feed channel, about $1,500 or more for one post.
Right now, much of that income is helping pay for this home.
Hey! Nice to meet you.
Tomorrow, Megan's taking me on one of her signature mountaineering adventures.
I have to make sure that all the gear is clean, it's repaired, that we're safe, everything's ready to go.
We're planning a 4.5-mile hike up the Cascade Mountains, climbing around 2,500 feet. We'll be camping overnight and then hiking down. This was supposed to be a mild hike, and it's a total breeze for Megan. But not so much for me.
This is not easy. I always want to make sure we're as safe as possible, but there are always these moments where we're on something exposed or we're climbing something. I'm thinking about what if there's a rock fall and we plummet to our death. Those fears are very real. It's so warm outside, you guys. It's crazy.
Finally, 4 hours behind schedule, we arrive at the campsite.
Are we here? Yeah. This looks like. Woo! We did it.
And after the coldest night of my life, we wake up to this. It's the window of good weather Megan was hoping for, and she uses it to stage a sponsored photo for an energy bar she brought along.
I'm always trying to think about how do I take something and make it look at home or natural or normal in these wild landscapes.
I think a lot of people will be watching this and think, this looks miserable. Why does she do this? Why do you do it?
I am so happy out here. It's a little ridiculous. You wake up with mornings like this and you sort of forget the sweating and the heavy bags and sort of live in that moment. a pretty good office. I'll take it.
Megan's post of the energy bar has now been seen by 16,000 people. And since our trip, she's signed sponsorship deals with 3 new clients, making the $1.6 billion market for Instagram influencers just a little bigger. But the world of social media changes fast, and Megan knows there are plenty of things that could derail her newfound career. It's not a stable job, and it's certainly not an easy job. But for now, she can't imagine living her life any other way.
Sun came out. So beautiful. I've had young women reach out to me and say that they've found inspiration or they've gone on a hike or climbed a peak. That's the upside to social media. You have this ability to inspire people and to actually touch their lives offline. And that's pretty cool.
That was Bloomberg's Aki Ito. Up next, going private plans. Former Qualcomm chair Paul Jacobs at Bloomberg's Year Ahead Summit. This is Bloomberg. Paul Jacobs, ousted chair of Qualcomm, is still thinking about taking the chip maker private. He sat down with Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang to explain at the Bloomberg's Year Ahead Summit in New York. Take a listen.
Things that Qualcomm can do, it's a big company. It was having a hard time to focus in on some of the leading edge applications because they're a lot smaller. I mean, it's a big company, needs big customers, lots, billion chipsets almost a year, that kind of thing. So we're able to actually focus in on the leading edge customers, drive the whole end-to-end system. Qualcomm's becoming increasingly just focused on building the componentry. They've actually de-emphasized the development of new technologies, so that's the reason why I've been able to get a number of the really good system engineers, because they're not seeing that they're able to do that kind of deep innovation. I mean, the wireless industry in general has disinvested from the fundamental technology innovation. Really, it's Huawei and Samsung are the key leaders at this point, and XCOM now is trying to also do that. We're small, I get it, but we have partners as well, and so we'll work with partners closely to bring these innovations to market.
And speaking of deep innovations, that was one of your primary theses behind taking Qualcomm private, to allow it to really focus on these long-term bets. So I have to ask you, are you still working on that?
So I don't have any updates now. I mean, basically, we continue to watch what the company is doing. Obviously, there have been not great developments on the legal side for them. The stock price is down. The market cap's like half of what it was when I was there. So we're watching it. One of my favorite sayings is, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So we're prepared, we watch, and in the meantime, as there's resources that are leaving, and they're great resources, and we want to retain a critical mass, we're able to hire those people.
How would XCOM fit into a potential take private, theoretically?
Oh, I mean, it could have gone back in and been the corporate R&D department. It could have been, some leading edge application. So there's lots of ways that XCOM could work in a take private.
Well, when you first discussed it, it was sort of largely dismissed by analysts and observers. And now there have been a lot of market fluctuations, as you said, and even at around $55 a share, it's still a $65 to $70 billion company. Mm-hmm. How exactly would it work?
Okay, so there's debt and equity, and there's you have to go put together the whole thing. But the question at this point now is, if you look at the EBITDA of the company, it's come down. If you look at their financial results, there were a number of one-time events. There have been stock buybacks to make the EPS go up, but debt is based off of EBITDA. So now that's come down as well. So the market cap comes down, but there's cash now off the balance sheet. There's all these different things that have gone on with the company. So like I said, no updates. I don't want to give any updates. We're watching the company. We're prepared if an opportunity arises.
Paul Jacobs there, the former CEO of Qualcomm, current chair and CEO of XCOM, with our own Selena Wang. Keep in mind, Paul Jacobs is the son of one of Qualcomm's co-founders. Here to tell us more, Bloomberg's Ed Hammond. Ed, you were listening to that conversation very intently. He kept saying no updates, no updates. Did we get anything new there in terms of whether or how he'd be able to pull this off?
It doesn't sound like it. There was no indication from the interview that he's close to doing any kind of deal there. Look, we know that this is something he's interested in. He said it's something he's interested in. The big challenge, as always, is finance. He's trying to do one of the biggest, if not the biggest, take-private deal in history. The financing, is it there? Difficult to say. There was rumors early on that potentially some of it was coming from Saudi Arabia. You would be pretty bold to think that Saudi Arabian money coming into the US in that sort of quantity at the moment would be an easy thing to achieve with what's going on there. So look, I think probably no updates is actually a fair statement for him to make. It's very unclear how this situation would have progressed from where he initially kicked it off a few months ago just by saying he was interested.
And quickly, Ed, we only have about 30 seconds left, but from my conversations with Qualcomm's current CEO, Steve Mollenkopf, sounds like they don't want this to happen. He said he thinks a private company could be even more constrained.
Yeah, and look, this is just about the opposing theses that they have. Mollenkopf thinks this is a good public company. He wants to make profit. And then you have on the other side Paul Jacobs, who thinks R&D is the future.
All right, Bloomberg's Ed Hammond for us. Thanks so much, Ed. We'll see you back here tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.